Hello and welcome to Outside the Box. This is the MLS podcast, the actual whip around show that you want to listen to. That's going to cover all of your MLS needs. I am here with three other co-hosts, so it's going to be a big panel. But I think everyone here is really great. Great chat so far. We've already just been talking some MLS. I'll go first here with Daniel, MLS shill. Tell us about yourself, man. How did you get into MLS?
So I didn't grow up playing soccer. A little bit more unique. There was a lot of downtime for everybody during COVID. Grew up, playing football, running track, playing basketball, all that good stuff. Typical middle of nowhere. But I took a big interest to soccer because it was the only thing to gamble on during COVID that was still active. And I had my best friend from high school and college. He played D1 soccer. So if I ever had any questions with on the gambling side of things or asking him to explain, why people did what, he was always there ready to answer those questions and talk about strategy and tactical stuff. So I got real into it at that point and made some money during COVID, and then I moved to North Carolina in 2021, right after Charlotte FC. Uh, what was had their opening day and was incepted, and that was such a thrilling moment, just being there and watching supporters basically appear from nowhere, ready to support the team. We weren't very good our first year, but just being around it and seeing the support really kind of made me fall in love with it beyond the tactical side of everything.
Hell yeah. Joining us over from Portland is Jeremy, big Cascadia guy over here. Tell us about yourself, man. How are you?
Well, I also grew up, I did grow up playing a little bit of soccer, and I was aware that the Timbers existed as a minor league team. And then everything changed in 2011 when they became an MLS team. And I went to their second ever game, which was a 3-2 victory against FC Dallas, and I got hooked. Continued being a fan for 11 years before 2 years ago getting an opportunity to run my own website in which I write articles about the team. Kind of an unofficial beat reporter, but kind of one of the only people who's there for every single available media session. So the Timbers are absolutely my passion, but the website, Cascadia FC, we cover every single professional soccer team, men's and women's, in both, in Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland. And this is about to be year 3. So I'm very happy that I've been able to take what was a fandom and now transform it into something a little more professional.
I think that's like something like a little bit of magic that MLS provides because it is just such, like it's wide open for anyone to really come in and, make it their own. Finally joining us is Mr. Josh Bathtub,
Hey
notorious
everybody.
notorious Twitter follow. Uh, Tell us about yourself though, man.
Yeah, Notorious Twitter, that's a good way to put it. Might put that in my bio. I am a Sporting Kansas City fan, live and die. I've seen MLS Cups, I've seen Open Cups, I've seen us extend a 34-year-old Alan Pulido. So I've really got a range of experience following the team. But I've been a fan of the team since my first game, probably back in like 2010, back when they right when they opened the new stadium, one of the first soccer specific stadiums in the country. And it's nice to be on here. Obviously, Juan, you get it. Fan of an original team. These
Uh
two cannot stand that, and that's okay. They can't say that, but that's okay. But yeah, I'm just a fan of the sport. Been playing it my whole life, and I love seeing how much it's grown. And I think that MLS is right on the precipice of like a massive growth. With the World Cup coming in 2026, I just want to be a part of that in any way that I can. So just happy to be here with other people who also want to chat ball. So yeah.
And chatting ball, indeed, we will do so. Everyone was earlier, we were just kind of throwing out all of the off-season news. There's a big kind of dynamic shift in MLS happening with with a lot of the teams. I think the big one we're going to go to is the Earthquakes. We have Josh here talking about them. I mean, what do you guys think about the Earthquakes? How is everyone feeling about just their general business? The big headline, of course, is Chicho Arango heading over there. What are we thinking? Josh, I'll start with you and see what everyone else is feeling.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Quakes have a sort of reputation as a bit of a meme team around MLS. They're one of the originals, but they're historically run by a bad owner. They don't really do that whole important thing of investing in the team, which that's how you win games. So the Quakes have always been kind of in and around the trenches of the Western Conference and Major League Soccer, finishing bottom a few times in the last few years. So it's their whole plan is centered on rebuilding, right? We thought that they might have had that with their coach. Who was their coach that was like insane with their what is man marking? I forget his name. Almeida.
Matias Almeida.
Yeah, Almeida. So we thought that maybe that might be this rebuild. Obviously didn't work out. So they've gone to a perennial old head within Major League Soccer. Bruce Arena is back. I, for one, am a little shocked by that. I don't know about you guys. I know that we don't really know the details behind what happened behind the scenes at New England. But every good rebuild starts with a good coach. And as much as he might have his detractions, his time with the U.S. men's national team might not be what we wanted it to be. His record in Major League Soccer kind of speaks for itself. And bringing Bruce Arena, he's a stable coach. You know what to expect, but he'll win you games. He'll win you games in a way that I think San Jose just haven't done. And they've gone out and also invested and given him investment. So we've got Ian Harkes coming in from the Revolution. Obviously, there's a connection there. Mark Anthony Kaye.
From the Revolution, honestly.
Yep. Mark Anthony Kaye, Dave Romney, Earl Edwards Jr., all coming in from the Revolution. So Bruce has his guys. They let Bruce go get his guys, and I think that's so important as a coach or as an ownership, letting your coach get his guys. Obviously, as you said, Chicho Arango. That's a big play. I, for one, didn't see that coming. I'm in a group chat with a few RSL fans. They didn't see it coming. And the fee was what? 1.5 million in GAM? Like, that's a steal. It's a steal. That's how much Sporting KC got for Alan Pulido, just so we're clear. And obviously this is an exciting time to be an Earthquakes fan. Now, when we talk about what we can expect for the season for them, with these signings, they won't be aiming too high, obviously. They're coming from trenches. This is a rebuild. So an 8th seed, 7th seed, potentially sneaking as high as 6th seed is probably what I would say for the Earthquakes. I like the business so far. Obviously, Josef Martinez is also reportedly on his way. So there's something coming. There's something cooking there. It'll be exciting to see. I'm really excited to see what the Quakes have put together. When you back Bruce Arena, you get results. I think that's what the Quakes needed. What are your guys' thoughts?
I agree with that. And also, I think the Quakes last year were one of the unluckiest teams in the league, particularly because their starting keeper from 2022, Daniel, who put together a goalkeeper of the year caliber campaign. His underlying numbers were fantastic. He got hurt very early in the season, and they had to turn to William Yarbrough, who was one of the worst goalkeepers last year by those underlying numbers. And former head coach Luchi Gonzalez was unable to really solidify their defense. But their attack last year, and I will still stand by this, I think they were completely legit in attack with Jeremy Abobasi, new signing Amal Pellegrino, incoming DP Hernan Lopez, who we haven't seen the best of yet, and then also their other DP, Christian Espinoza, who's been their best player for a few seasons by now. Now you add Chicho Arango to that front line, which is now Arango, Pellegrino, Lopez, and Espinoza, with Pellegrino being a TAM player. That is a really, really strong attack. Now, in terms of where I think they need to add before they really start to become like contender status, because I think that attack is contender worthy, I still think they need another defensive midfielder. They really do. They let go of Jackson Ewell, who, even though he wasn't spectacular, always did a job for them but they really need to upgrade on Carlos Gruezo more than anything, who was a DP. I don't think he'll be a DP this year. I think he'll become a TAM player, but they really need someone else in that defensive midfield in order to become serious. But right now, based on the way their offseason has gone, I already see them as a playoff team.
No way. Really?
Yeah, really, really. I do. I believe in that attack, and that attack can carry you into the playoffs. I don't think it can help you win deep into the playoffs. They still need to get a little bit better defensively, but I think they can easily make a run for the wild card game and probably finish top 7 if their attack keeps firing year after year, or at least like game after game, and they get a full healthy season from Daniel.
What are you thinking, Daniel?
Yeah, we were just talking about you, goalkeeper. What is it?
I'm thinking you get a guy on a TAM deal in Pellegrino who in 2022 had 25 goals and 10 assists, right? 2023, 24 goals and 14 assists in a league that would probably be widely considered as equal to better than the MLS. Then you throw in additions like Lopez, and everybody's been incredibly excited seeing how much Christian Espinosa's done with how little he's had around him in that final third. So I think they're adding all the right pieces. They're missing quite a bit on defense, as we touched on. I can see them winning games 5-3, 5-4, and just purely winning by outscoring people. I can see them being a top 8 team out in the West, but I can't see them, getting past a 6 to 8 seed in that range.
Yeah, I'm excited for the attack of what this does for the team's attack, but I still think you lose a good outside back in Carlos Acapo. With no. Chicho Arango can also play as a 10, and so I wouldn't put it past Bruce to put him as a 10 and Joseph as a striker and have Hernan Lopez play a bit deeper. Though I don't know if that'll work, but that's like I think Josh said it best. If you back Bruce Arena, you're bound to get some results. So it should be at least better than what it was last year.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned rebuild a lot, and I think an important part of the rebuild is getting rid of the old build. Jeremy Ebobisse. Jeremy Ebobisse was he was performing in San Jose. Now I know his numbers dropped last year, but as far as I'm concerned, that's a decent MLS striker. Like you mentioned, Jackson Ewell leaving, JT Marcinkowski, who's gotten games, Tommy Thompson. These are all players who they were the old guard, and I like that San Jose has been kind of ruthless and wasn't holding on to them for any sentimental reasons. That's what I like that about a rebuild here out in San Jose.
Where do we want to go to next? Who wants to take the floor?
Can we go a little bit farther north and talk about Portland, the quietest, most important off season?
Let's talk, man.
Their off season started 2 hours after losing 5-0 at home to the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Well, they were on the road, technically.
On the road at home, which that's going to be a trivia question one day. Who is the only team to lose a home playoff game, a road playoff game at home? That will be the Portland Timbers. And they did it in what I called at the time their worst loss in team history, given the stakes, given the scoreline. 2 hours after that, Evander, star player, my vote for MVP last year, even without just the bias of being from Portland and supporting the Timbers, just based on the sheer number of goal contributions that he had. He takes to Twitter and is obviously angry about the way the season has gone. After a Qatari bid got rejected it was late August actually. When that Qatari bid came in, it got rejected. It was nowhere near what I would consider a serious bid, considering the Timbers paid $10 million for him. That bid was around $9 million, so completely unserious. But it kind of dragged him through the rest of the season. He wasn't very happy. The club offered him a contract extension. He turned it down because there was a sticking point over a release clause. I don't know how much really to believe about that. I think it's just more a fact of his father being a very bad agent. But that carried over throughout the entire rest of the offseason. Are they going to sell him? Are any of these bids that could be worth accepting, are those going to come in? And it hasn't. And I think it took a serious toll on what the Timbers' plans for this offseason was. They did sign Ariel Lassiter on a free for squad depth, but with Evander's situation still very much up in the air, there isn't a ton of like extra work they can do in a roster that I consider pretty well built to this point. Lots of center back depth, good fullbacks. There is the incoming Joao Ortiz from Ecuador, who's going to partner David Ayala in the midfield. But you also have one of the best attacks in MLS with Evander, Jonathan Rodriguez, Felipe Mora, and Santiago Moreno, who also could leave. Moreno could. So now that preseason is officially open, players are reporting back. I haven't heard anything on whether or not Evander is back. I know Jonathan Rodriguez, Santiago Moreno, the other core group of players are there, but his situation is going to be very, very interesting to watch, because how are the Timbers going to handle it if he hasn't shown up yet? And do they start to lower their expectations for what kind of deal they'd be accepting? And this is coming off of a window where Facundo Torres just got sold to Palmeiras for 15 million, who solid player. I wouldn't consider him anything special, but he has very good name recognition. And Dallas is entertaining a bid of 10 million from Boca Juniors for Alan Velasco coming off an ACL tear. So I think however this Evander situation gets resolved, that's going to set the table for what the Timbers, for what their ceiling can be this season. But it's still very early in the offseason, and let's just see where it goes. Let's just see where it goes. It's a lot of tense. There's just a ton of tension up in the Pacific Northwest, specifically around the Timbers right now.
Are we saying they're a loser or a winner so far?
I can't call them a winner or a loser. I think what the fans expected was a little bit more departures, one of which has already occurred. Eric Williamson getting traded to Charlotte FC for kind of a cut price deal, given that he had 1 year left on his contract. Opens up a little bit more cap space. I think they can do a little bit more. I'd love to see them sign another left back, but at the same time, their hands are kind of tied right now. So it is a little bit of a disappointment, but I can't call them a loser because Evander hasn't been sold yet. All the other pieces to that excellent attack are still there, and it's only year 2 under Phil Neville. And it's kind of just like, okay, cautious optimism, but that stink of the 5-0 loss in the wild card round is still very much in everyone's mouth.
Meanwhile, a bit more north of Portland, Seattle's going crazy. They've gone in, I think, the biggest trade so far, maybe before the year. No, I mean, I think this one clears it in terms of GAM, but Jesus Ferreira going over from Dallas to Seattle. I mean, how's everyone feeling about Jesus Ferreira? Are we still, has anyone been as high on him as I am? I quite think he's a great player. He's a great MLS player, let's just say. Like, I don't think he can go to Europe at this point, but if he just sticks around, he's a good, MLS guy. What are we thinking?
I totally agree. He's a great MLS guy. And I think that's, for a position like striker, you're number 9. That's what you want. I know we talk about going out and splashing on these big DP signings, these big names coming from abroad to come and do the business. And sometimes they work. Sometimes you might get a Josef Martinez when Atlanta signed him in 2018. Other times, and he could still come good, but you might get an Olivier Giroud. I think when these teams spend big on positions, one of the ones that I think that they can probably afford to dial back a little on and maybe look within the league is Major League Soccer, because this is striker. I mean, striker is the position that I think that they can dial back on. And it's just because Jesus Ferreira won't need as much time to get adapted to the league. He won't be under all this pressure. These players come over and then they're certainly under a spotlight a little bit to see how they perform. and that could affect them as well. So I like the pickup, especially as a striker in this league. You want to look inter-league because you might just pick up a gem, and I think Jesus Pereira is one of those gems.
Yeah, I tend to agree. He's just one of those strikers that's fun to watch, right? He's good on set pieces. He can stretch the field. He can come back and play false nine and play the 1-2 game a little bit. And the best part about the whole trade was he's not a DP there, right? So they're really maximizing their budget and we brought up that he might be a good MLS striker, but he might not be ready to go to Europe. But I feel like a guy like Jesus Ferrer is making this move so he can play in bigger competitions, get a fresh start, and he's taking less money. So hopefully it's to inevitably take that jump into Europe if it does present itself.
Let's talk.
I saw that Ferreira deal, and I was waiting to see whether or not he'd be a DP. He's not. That's a good deal for Seattle. What is not a good deal for Seattle is the fact that their final DP slot is now being occupied by Jordan Morris, because now you've spent a fair amount of allocation money to bring in another striker, where Morris actually succeeded last year. He did pretty well up there. So what do you do with Jordan Morris now? Do you move him back out to the wing? Do you finally get a full healthy season of De La Vega? And you've also re-signed Albert Rusnak to a DP deal. So I do think going out and getting a great player like Ferreira, who I do believe is great, will help Seattle. But also it does create congestion at positions where you have your other DPs, where Ferreira could probably play the 10 in Seattle system. He could also play up top. And Morris and Rusnak, both occupying DP slots, will be playing those positions. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Schmetzer solves for it more than anything else. But you have to call Seattle one of the winners of the offseason just because they were able to pull off this Ferreira trade and get him on a contract that isn't going to cost a DP hit.
I know there's maybe a left field take, but I would put Ferreira as a left wing, personally. Like, I'd see him on one of the wings, see how he does, because he's one of those guys that I think could benefit from Nuhu being behind him and just being able to really do damage, out wide with the ball at his feet. But that's just where I would put him if I was Seattle, especially if De La Vega's, if he has another disappointing, year or start of the season, it's going to be, it's going to be a committee of guys that find time on the wing, and I think Ferreira inevitably ends up there. If I'm looking into the crystal ball, I guess. Anything else about Seattle before we move on to another team?
I think that's very creative. Some people look at him and see Jesus Ferreira. You look at him and see the American Timo Werner. I love it.
I mean, there is a little. I mean, I think Morris probably fits that profile a bit more, but yeah. In short, I think so. Moving on, let's talk about New England. I think that'd be a good one to go upon, because I think I read that like they're gonna be losing more than half of their rostered minutes. Vrioni's gone, Emmanuel Boateng's gone, Bazarek Terovic is gone, Romney, Kay, Harks, these, Tim Parker, they are just cleaning house in New England, and this is properly Caleb Porter's team now, looking more and more like it. How are you feeling about this? Who wants to lead with New England?
I guess the question is, do you think Leonardo Campagna, Noel Buck getting recalled from Southampton, and Jackson Yule are enough to make up for their already, I guess, troubled team that they've already lost half of, right? And to answer that question, I just don't think so. Simply put, would you agree or disagree?
I am a strong Caleb Porter hater, honestly. I don't see the vision here. I'd be interested to see what Jeremy thinks about it, seeing as Caleb Porter used to be a head coach for the Timbers. But I don't know, when you lose this many guys, and I guess they're not all playing valuable minutes, right? Because a lot of them, Ian Harks off the bench, Tim Parker was acquired late, Nick Lehman never panned out really. even like losing Dylan Barreiro and like they're losing a lot of their team, and I just don't think that that's conducive in like you need like some consistency, some congruency there. I don't know how everyone else is feeling about that, but clean house pretty much.
I think they'll live and die by their brand new center back pairing that they just acquired this offseason. Mamadou Fofana and Brian Ceballos. Uh, a lot of those departing names were center backs. And it was pretty clear by the end of the season that Porter did not really like any of the options he had available to him. I think their only center back who is returning, or at least anyone who played significant minutes last year, is Andrew Farrell, who's a club legend. So I don't think he's going to get the start. It's up to Fofana and Ceballos to stabilize the spine of that team. I think adding Ewell's a bit underrated. They shelled out a lot of allocation money to get Campana, who did deserve to start in this league. But there's going to be questions as to whether or not it's too much. But when you're supposed to be fed by Carlos Hill, I think he'll be able to repay that allocation fee. I think he gets double-digit goals this year. But I'm really interested to see how high they can climb, because it is an improved team, but it's just so much change in one offseason. Just seeing how quickly they can gel and get off to a good start, I think that will show how high their ceiling can be, because the East is very, very top heavy. And I think New England can certainly make it into the playoff picture, but it just depends on how stable they can be, especially at the back.
Yeah, I think also Al Hassan Yusuf is going to be a great like for him to actually start the season here. It's going to be a net positive for them, just because he ended up so positive. He looked really good amongst a really sea of bad play in New England. Yusuf, I'm excited about. I don't know. I don't think you can really turn around a team like that and compete. I think it's going to be a bit of a learning period. Maybe they could end up as a U.S. Open Cup like deep run or something like that, because then that they have the talent for a one-off game like that. I just don't know how it how it looks like over the course of a season.
What I think is interesting is we have lauded praise on the Earthquakes and their rebuild, and with the Revolution, we're like feeling iffy about it. We're not 100% sure. I think the reason is like we don't see a plan here with the Revs. We don't really see any sort of like congruency with what with their signings and who they've decided to keep and who they decided to let walk. And I think that's why we're so turned off from them. But what do you guys think? Do you guys agree?
Well, for me, it wasn't too long ago that New England were first in the Supporters' Shield, and that was all Bruce Arena, right? And so, I think these guys are both legacy coaches, but of the two, you really can trust Bruce more. I don't think that's quite like an off thing to say, because Caleb Porter has like for whatever reason he comes out just so like he lays it on real hard on a lot of the times. You're just like, geez, man, like just throws players under the bus publicly, and so I wonder where this if it'll happen. I just don't see like two foreign center backs joining the league is never like, it's never a good feeling, I think, for a brand new back line like that.
Yeah, I completely agree.
At least San Jose had a decent back line last year that was missing due to injury, and a lot of them will be back. New England's just full blown delete club mode.
Well, there is one thing to talk about in terms of New England, and that's Caleb Porter himself. He's had two different tenures in this league with two different coaches. Both have lasted 5 years. In year 3, he won MLS Cup with both teams. In 2015 with Portland, 2020 with Columbus. By year 5, he had pissed off everyone else around him and was let go. So I might not be too high on New England. I don't really see the vision this year, but I'm kind of convinced, just based on Porter's pattern, that you know what? Screw it. I think they win in 2026. They win the cup because he's done it twice before. If he does it the third time, like he could just do it. But once again, there's still a good amount of work to do on this New England roster. So we might not see. We're seeing the start of the vision. We're not seeing the entirety of it right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and then there's also it could implode even more in year 2, and he doesn't even get that third year. And so that's kind of I think all he has to do is just be better than last year, and so expectations are quite low over there. Anything if they implode again, then it's going to be hard to justify that third year. But let's move on. Let's talk about Austin because they look to be when Rodolfo Borrell joined as their sporting director, I think a lot of people were expecting them to kind of have this like deep connections and ties to like the global market, and it ends up being he's just a very shrewd guy and very I guess meticulous in what he's going for. But I mean, Daniel, you wanted to bring up Austin. What do you got to talk to us about them so far? What are you seeing from them?
Yeah, so I just want to preface this by saying I don't think Austin has made enough moves to put themselves in a real spot to contend, right? But I think the storylines that are evolving around them right now are worth bringing up, right? Since their inception, when they placed second in the West, only trailing LAFC. They just failed to evolve for the following 2 years, like the rest of the league has really for the last 2 years. So as everyone around them has continued to get better, they've either lost players and stayed the exact same. A lot of that, I believe, has been some tension in the locker rooms. It looks like one of the causes for that tension is all on its way out. Sebastian Driussi looking to make a move to River Plate and back to Argentina here this upcoming year. But then they go off and add names like Brandon Vasquez, who is a proven commodity in the MLS. He couldn't win out the starting job over in Monterrey, but when he was available and when he did play, particularly the moments that he had in the CCC, he was impressive. Last year, they added a guy from Red Star Belgrade in Bukhari, who, look, I have a buddy who's from Serbia. He played professional soccer over there, and I texted him the second that move was made, and I was like, "What do you know about this guy?" And he was just like, all you got to know is he scored against Man City in the Champions League. He's a young guy with an upside similar to, well, he didn't say similar to with the upside, but he was just like, his game is very similar to that of a Raheem Sterling. So he's very direct. He likes to slash. And when you pair that with a guy like Vasquez, I think there's a lot of potential there to actually shore up their attack. On top of a guy like Ilie Sanchez, who's another proven commodity in the league. He's a very stable presence for any midfield, particularly from that holding position. So I'm excited about their upside. I think they've made the moves, and there are a couple moves on defense away from becoming a legitimate contender in what I also consider to be a top-heavy Western Conference.
I have a question for y'all. Is Ilie Sanchez a direct upgrade over Alexander Ring?
Depends on what what Nico Estevez, their new head coach, wants to install as the game model. Because Ring, good in possession, but better defensively. I don't think Ilie has the same defensive chops that he did like a couple of years ago, but he is very much an asset in possession. So I'm interested to see what Nico Estevez does with this team and does with this squad. Particularly, I think Vasquez is the best striker Austin has had in their entire existence. Since they came into the league, they've had a giant hole at the number 9 that was filled the best by Maxi Urruti in 2022 when they finished second and lost in the Western Conference Final. But I think Bukhari, I saw him in person last year when he came to Portland. He's going to be a problem this year. He's really, really, really good. I think Danny Pereira is one of the most underrated central mids in MLS. And another underrated player who earned his way into the starting job last year was their center back, Svatok, who was a summer acquisition. He's going to claim one of those starting center back spots this season. And he could end up being one of the better defenders in this league. So I'm not incredibly high on Austin, mostly because I do believe they are a big question mark, especially with Driussi leaving and seemingly on his way out. But that opens a DP slot. It opens up a ton of room in salary they can use. So I'm interested to see how they fill it because I don't expect him to be on this team when the season kicks off in about a month and a half.
It was also reported that if he does leave, they're going to look to fill it before this next window is closed. So it seems like if he's out the door, that seems it's where things are indicating, right? It does seem like they do have a replacement ready and lined up. Just nothing's been out yet. Back to Ilie Sanchez, I think what he provides, because he might not be a direct upgrade over Alex Ring, but the man's a winner, right? In a culture that has been reported to be toxic in the past, when you bring in a guy who is, has captain experience over at LAFC, he's just won everywhere he's been. So I think you add that into the locker room, you can grow around that, because culture isn't something that's created overnight. Something that was kind of instilled over a long course of time, and you need guys like him in the locker room to guide the younger guys and set that precedent.
How are you feeling, Mr. Bathtub? After all, Ilie Sanchez used to be a SKC player.
He did. And I think the question isn't if he's a direct upgrade on Alexander Ring now. I think that answer is I think that's a yes. Is Alexander Ring, is he an upgrade on when they brought in Alexander Ring originally? I think that's kind of an interesting way that I'm thinking about it, because like Austin brought him in as a part, like he was like their first major signing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was a big pickup from NYCFC at the time. This is Austin are in another rebuild, and does Ilie move the needle like Alexander Ring might have at the time? Personally, for me, I don't think so. But knowing Nico Estevez, I feel like he's kind of more of a pragmatic coach. He knows what he wants, and he wants guys that simply, like, they'll play simple. And Ilie, as much as like his game is all about his intelligence, it is a very simple game, and I think that's what makes him so effective. So I think, in terms of, is he an upgrade on Alexander Ring? I'd say probably not. I think in terms of, is he an upgrade on when they brought in Alexander Ring originally, and how do we compare the two players in when they came in? There's an argument there that I think Ilie he's going to play an important part, but he just won't be that standout player that they might expected, like they did with Alexander Ring.
Yeah, so I guess just overall great rebuild piece is Ilie Sanchez, right?
Yeah.
I think ultimately what it's going to come down to is who's going to feed the ball to Brandon Vasquez, because Driussi a lot of the time was kind of typecasted as this creative attacking midfielder in Josh Wolf's system, and that was never really Driussi's bag. He's more of like the finisher, the guy that can find the ball in the box, kind of more of a foxy type of 10. And instead, like, with the ball at his feet, there wasn't a lot of cohesion there. There wasn't really much link-up play between him and Bukhari. So now, I mean, if you're going to bring in a DP, like, ultimately, I think, who Austin would benefit from is a guy like Hernan Lopez, who can just, or a Ricky Puig, someone that can just, be a quarterback for them and find Bukhari deep in open space, can find a threaded through ball to Brandon Vasquez, because at the end of the day, like, Brandon Vasquez is a proven goal scorer, but he's also had, service from like Acosta, and before Acosta, Barrial, and there's plenty of service going his way, of that caliber. He's not really been the guy to like lead a line and like, give me the ball and I'll score. So I mean, ultimately, it just depends on what playmakers Austin get for me, because right now it's still very much looking like a smash and grab type of deal for Austin.
So the Brandon Vasquez deal isn't moving the needle for you as much as other people, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like, compare that to the Chicho Arango one, where there's a lot of flexibility with where you can put him. He's a direct upgrade over a Bobasi, even though he had a bad tail end of last season with Salt Lake, and I'd like to get into Salt Lake a bit, but it's just easier to see the vision through like a Chicho Arango signing than it is Brandon Vasquez. But that's only because Austin, still have quite a lot of business yet to do, I think. So.
Okay, yeah. So maybe this is a revisit at the end of the transfer window and see who they've brought in to build around Brandon Vasquez. Because I think I agree. Right now it just feels like we need to go out there and get somebody, but that doesn't always work. You need to also have the structure behind them. Brandon Vasquez won't deliver if he's not being delivered to.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
Can we
Austin?
agree? Oh, sorry.
No, go
What
for
was
it.
that? I was gonna say, can we agree of the 3 Texas teams, Austin's probably had the most positive transfer so far?
By default.
I would say yes.
Yeah, by default. They won the wooden spoon, but kind of.
Yeah.
But it is still a trophy, right?
Yeah, it's just a made up trophy that we just made for them right now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, Houston did a lot of cleaning out, but I agree.
Yeah, and they also let go of Usman Silla, who was supposed to be a big draft pick. But yeah, Houston's quiet. FC Dallas is quiet. RSL, on the other hand, they've been busy cleaning house, just like New England in some ways here. Chicho Arango gone. Matt Crooks, who is very disappointing, who did not look anything like MLS talent at all, goes back to the championship. Anderson Julio is gone. You also have the lasting effects of the Andre Gomes deal when he went to Rennes in the French Ligue 1. Overall, like Salt Lake, this overhaul of their attack, they do get Pablo Ruiz coming back, who was who had to, I think he tore his ACL in a early season match last year or something to that except, or maybe his MCL. I'm forgetting, but like he's by default an upgrade over Matt Crooks, but to overhaul an attack like this, you're bringing in Elias Manuel, who has been mostly inconsistent at New York Red Bulls, hasn't really garnered much form. Tyler Wolff, who's more of a rotational piece, could never go in ahead of the star wingers in Atlanta. And if he did, that tells you more about Atlanta's form than anything else. But overall, I'm just not seeing it with Salt Lake this year. And I think that just being a Pablo Mastroeni fan, seeing him from the Rapids as head coach and how his kind of seasons turned out after big turnover like this, I don't think that these players are going to buy into Pablo ball the way that it was really working before Gomez left. And I think he gets the sack this year, just based off how Salt Lake have been building their roster this year. It doesn't look like it's panning out for them. What are your guys' thoughts on Salt Lake? And I'm a Rapids fan, hands up. but I felt like this fall off had been kind of trending this way since last July.
Well, the kind of apex, that the thing that led to all that fall off was that 4-game ban when Chicho just for some reason lost his temper in Portland and got 4 games suspended. And then before he comes back, Gomez is sold. And it kind of just led to questions as to what are they going to do to replace Gomez? They brought in Dominic Marschuk on a U22 deal, but he didn't really replicate that form. But they also brought in their DP10 Diogo Gonçalves, which at the time looked like a massive coup. $3 million from Copenhagen, I believe. And he still needed a little bit of time to settle, but it seemed like they were trying to rebuild it a little bit on the fly after selling Gomez, which if you get an offer like that and you do want to become a selling club, I feel like you kind of have to accept it and just say, let's put our scouting department to work. But the other moves this offseason, getting rid of Arango for that price is ridiculous. I'd be at least holding out for $2 million a game, especially after the Ferreira deal was completed. But I'm really interested to see, first of all, if Pablo gets fired, which if he does, I think that's a little bit unfair to him, given all of these roster changes. But I'm really interested to see what Elias Manuel will do as the starting number 9. I don't think they're going to bring in another striker, which I think is disappointing in a lot of aspects, especially if you happen to have the misfortune of being an RSL fan. But I think whatever Elias Manuel can do is going to be the ceiling for their attack. But they do have 2 wingers that I like. I do like Diego Luna. I do like Marschuk. I think he needed the offseason to really just settle in Salt Lake because it's a very difficult place to settle with all the inversion. So I'm very interested to see, first of all, if Diego Luna can take a bigger step forward in carrying this team. But I like their defensive pieces. I like their midfield. But I think their ceiling has definitely shrunk a little bit because of the Chicho sale and whatever position they decide to upgrade to bring in another DP. Because now they have that slot open. They have the money. They have to go get someone to fill that role. I don't think they do in the first transfer window, though.
I'm under the belief here that if Salt Lake were to if they were to be a selling club, as we say, I don't see how they couldn't sell Luna if an offer comes in for them. I think they sold their window last year by selling Gomez. That for me sold their entire, because heading up to summer they were at highest, I think, 3rd place. So they were one of the more dynamic teams, and I was quite high on them, despite being a Rapids fan. And then just this whole turnover, it just makes, for me, it signals way more of like Elias Manuel. That's a signing the Rapids go for, and then as a Rapids fan, I gotta wonder if Manuel is worth the XG or not, if he's really gonna cash in on all that. Because if you follow Elias Manuel, he's not a lethal goal scoring machine. He's a very fun player, I will give him that, but I just don't see. I'm not seeing the vision with RSL, and much less so how these players are going to morph into Pablo Ball. You're not going to get Manuel tracking back, I don't think. Where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this. I mean, I feel bad for a guy like Diego Luna. I think he's a great player. I think he's been through a lot in his young career so far. From what people would consider national team snubs, starting his career at the USL and working his way into the RSL, right? He's a good player. Do I think he's good enough to carry? No. But they do have good pieces, right? So it's gonna. I think the season's gonna be determined how well that back line gels, right? I'm a Brian Vera believer. I think Anelli's a decent piece and Ojeda's a decent piece. Diego Luna on the wing and with Marschuk, it's just I don't really know where their goals are going to come from an RSL standpoint, personally, unless they go out the end of the window and sign somebody, which they're going to have to, I would imagine.
I don't know if they do at the end of this window. It's January, it's a winter season for a lot of the what you would say are the bigger leagues. I feel like there's not that much business that gets done with the striker position at that point. Teams go through injury crises, and I think it's just hard to replace Chicho's output. And I honestly feel like this signing was a surprise to not only us, but I think a little bit to the Salt Lake City front office. I think they got that offer and they kind of ran with it, thinking that I don't know if they have a plan for it, basically, is what I'm saying. So I don't know if they have anybody lined up, or if they're just going to go with Austin Wolf and just say, yeah, or Manuel and say, yeah, let's just throw them out there and see what they can do.
Now, we've seen teams do this in the past where they kind of try to tread water until, that summer transfer window, and they go out and then that's when they get their guy, right? Do we think RSL's in a position to tread water until then and keep themselves in playoff contention?
That's a good question. That is a great question.
It depends on if Gonzalez is good or not, really.
Yeah.
I think their defense makes them a high floor team, but I don't think
fair.
I don't think their ceiling is too crazy. Also, another underrated thing they did They sold their backup goalkeeper. They sold Gavin Beavers.
Yeah, they sold
So
him
now,
abroad.
now it's truly Zach McMath's job. No more rotation between the goalkeepers, which will also solidify the defense a little bit.
Yeah.
Are
I'm
we?
a Justin Glad believer, so I'm on the same boat. I like RSL. I like RSL's defense a lot. The question marks in attack make me think, maybe they do have, maybe because so many teams make the playoffs. Maybe they would be a playoff team without that DP number 9 for the first third of the season. That's entirely possible.
Well,
It's
they could also put Gonzalez as a striker. I think best case for them is Pablo Ruiz coming back and not. I mean, it's going to be tough coming back from another injury like that. But if you could put Gonzalez ahead of Ruiz, Marschuk on the right, Luna on the left, those two should be enough of productive force. I just see the style that Pablo has played, and I don't see these players fitting that style. But it has evolved, so maybe that's where. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe I'm underrating them a bit, but the problems that they have still just stem from that Gomez sale, and there's more questions on them than definitives right now for me.
Yeah, I don't want to stay on RSL a whole lot longer, but looking at this, I mean, he was one of the best. Carlos Gomez was one of the best players at his position before he left, and people attribute their fall off to when Chicho got suspended, but it really kind of happened after Carlos Gomez left the team. I mean, they lost 12 goal contributions the second he left in in that number of games, right? 14 games, 7 goals or 7 assists, 5 goals. I mean, you're not really finding that elsewhere.
And
That's kind of what I'm seeing here.
Chicho hadn't scored since he hadn't scored since July 6th. I looked it up because I'm a hater, but
I
Hating's
feel like you
great.
should get that tatted on you.
not until he scores, and
Not
it's gonna
even-
be the worst tattoo ever.
It wasn't even
Yeah.
scoring. Like he didn't record a goal contribution until September 21st when he assisted Gonçalves. So
he was in
he
the,
was just
the thing.
completely
Yeah,
absent.
he was in that MVP race or Gold Boot race.
And then he just fell off.
He fell off, and maybe that 4-game match ban played a part in RSL's front office deciding to get rid. Maybe they were like, we got this offer in. It maybe not be what we want, but we've shown that we can survive without him. Let's get rid let's strike while the iron's hot. It could just be that they saw his value declining and decided to just pull the plug.
We've talked at length about what teams are doing in the offseason, kind of the big headlines. What are some teams you're a bit more disappointed on? I'll go down everyone and see. You can say your own team, which is totally fine. But what are some teams you were just kind of hoping for a better offseason from? Maybe it hasn't turned out, quite as expected. We'll start with Jeremy. Who you seeing as your disappointing so far?
I would say the Vancouver Whitecaps, only because they finally won a playoff game. They actually won 2 playoff games. They went out to their old nemesis LAFC after somehow rebounding from a 4-game losing streak to end the regular season to enter the playoffs with all the fire in the world. Then after they lose to LAFC in the 3rd game of that first round, they fire Vanni Sartini. There's reports that that the ownership group is looking to sell the team, and they still haven't found their head coach yet. Which I feel, if you're going to fire a head coach who is as good and can do so much with what little the Whitecaps have, because to be honest, they don't really have a lot. Their roster is really underbuilt, even though they have Ryan Gauld and they have Brian White, and they have a couple good pieces around there. But you need a really good manager to tie all that together. And Vancouver looked like they were building something really good, and then it just kind of all fell apart for them in this offseason. And they really need to get that coach. I think they need to find I think they need to find another like true attacking threat on the wing, because we don't know what this new head coach is going to do. And Vanny preferred using wingbacks. So you need to find someone on the wing who can at least replicate Fafa Pico's production. Pico, who has left, he's gone to Miami. So good for him. He gets to be teammates with the greatest player to ever live. But Vancouver really needs to replace that. And
Do you
I'm
think
just disappointed with.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think the contract negotiations for Fafa were just like, hey, you want to come live in Miami and play with Messi? And he was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Once
no,
again,
I would do it for free.
yeah. Miami has that cheat code. They have that.
They really
pull.
do.
And that even though everyone's like, oh, Chris Henderson, he did such a good job building this roster, which objectively he did. He did really well in the draft specifically. But when you can convince Matias Rojas to come here midseason and take a really small cap hit to just provide and play a supporting role to Messi, like you're doing great. But this isn't about Miami. I don't want Miami to overtake every conversation because there's plenty of other MLS pundits who allow that to happen. So I feel like Vancouver, I think it would be really interesting if they hired Giovanni Savarese because he plays a style of soccer that can win deep in the postseason. And that's the one thing that Vancouver has really struggled with. They don't win a lot of playoff games in their history. Now, part of that's due to just really meager investment from their front office. But I'm interested to see what happens in regards to their ownership group and who they appoint to be the leader of this project going forward. Because it's really hard to see letting Vanny go as anything else than a gigantic loss, both for the league, assuming he doesn't take another open job somewhere in the league at some point, or and Vancouver themselves.
Daniel, who's been your more disappointing team in the offseason so far?
It's got to be the Philly Union. They have been probably one of the most consistent and one of the more fun teams to watch for the last decade, for the better part of it at least. But you see players out like Brandon Craig, Jack Elliott, Leon Flack, guys who are actually contributing, right? And it seems like they're doing what they typically do, and they're relying on their younger guys. But you'd like to see in a league where everybody's starting to spend a little bit more money, you'd like to see your teams, particularly in your larger markets like Philadelphia, spend some money. I mean, their fans deserve it. I mean, they founded that club. Relying on your academy is not a bad trait, right? But you got to spend to have some players around them, and it just kind of stinks seeing them. It feels like they're just sitting around and waiting for Cave and Sullivan to kind of grow up a little bit, and then they're going to go around it. But you see a team like them who's been so successful, and now they're just kind of being stagnant. It kind of pains me to see.
It feels like they could have gotten Jesus Ferreira and looked like a way better team than what Seattle looks like right now with Jesus Ferreira.
I agree. And I really like Jim Curtin-Ball. It kind of stunk seeing him get fired. I know the fans and the supporters were Jim Curtin believers for the most part. You're always going to have your very, very, very loud minority when it comes to coach firings. But, I know people who are very close to that supporter group. I know people who helped found it, and they were sad to see him go. I know they have a long-term vision. I've heard about it. But I just, with the way that they don't like to spend money, I just can't really see, anything transpiring to make them a better team in 2025 as of right now.
How are we feeling about Bradley Carnell as the head coach?
I kind of feel like it was a 1-for-1 trade-off. I feel like
He's
fired
like Jim Curtin light.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought when I saw it. Is like they fired Jim Curtin and brought in a mini me of Jim Curtin, but and he doesn't have the personality of Jim Curtin either. Like when I think Jim Curtin, I think of a video that came out 2 years ago when it was just who would win in a fight, and they were talking about like superheroes, and he didn't understand the question. He said, "Who'd win in a fight over me and all these players? I'd beat them all up." I was like, that's kind of stuff is just so funny to me. And he was just such a big personality in Philadelphia, and it's kind of sad to see him go. But he'll be successful elsewhere.
Josh, who's your most disappointing team in the offseason so far?
Can I say San Diego, or is that a cop-out? What do we think, guys?
No, you can say it.
Yeah?
But you have to give your reasons why. I mean, I think they're disappointing too, but why do you think they...
Well, first of all, and this is kind of a joke, but also kind of not, they disparaged the tradition that is the expansion draft. I really didn't like how they just kind of picked up players and then threw them away, kind of. Disparaging that tradition is not what we do in this league. We are a proud American league, and we we don't disparage our traditions. That's mostly a joke. Although I thought, like, I was watching the draft, and specifically the pickup of Kojima, I was really interested in. I was like, that could just be a nice little pickup for them, and then they instantly threw him to DC, right?
I
So
felt the
good on
exact
DC.
same way. I felt the exact same
Yeah,
way.
I feel like there were not that many gems in the expansion draft. I didn't pay attention to like who the other teams hadn't protected, but I did pay attention to who Sporting KC had protected, and a lot of the players were like really expensive. Like Alan Pulido didn't get protected, or Daniel Shalhoub didn't get protected because they weren't underperforming. So I was kind of had a feeling that was the same across the league. But there were some gems, and I felt like Kojima was one of those gems that you put him in a system and you tell him to go out there and you tell him to just kind of cause some chaos, and he would have done that. And then they got rid of him, and I was like, okay, well, so they kind of disparaged the expansion draft, and I'm already kind of upset. But the signing of DP, Chucky Lozano, it's a huge pickup, especially for where San Diego is. He's going to a city that is proud of its Mexican heritage, and Chucky Lozano is, as far as I'm concerned, he is still the face of the Mexican national team. I know there's been some sort of fall off since his days from PSV to Napoli to back to PSV. I know he's not performing kind of at the height that we all had expected, but for me, he still is one of the first players that I think of when I think of El Tri. And so I was really impressed with that. But ever since then, I just don't feel like they built around him enough. Anibal Godoy, I've talked to some Nashville fans. They were happy to see him walk. Emmanuel Boateng, who's been around the league for a long time, hasn't really been performing as well as we might expect. There's some sort of unknowns coming in from like the Danish league, which is always here or there. They might be like quality pickups, or they might just be, oh, okay. I've kind of forgot that they were here. I don't really see how the roster comes together yet, and this might be a shout, but I feel like as far as right now, they have one of the worst expansion starting 11s that I've seen.
Yeah, I was about to throw Cincinnati up there.
Since he's another good shout.
Because, yeah, a lot of these kind of similar to that. What if they get De Bruyne, though? That kind of changes it, doesn't it?
Who's he gonna sling through balls to? I mean, what's around? I mean, I think we've seen time and time again. It doesn't matter how good an individual player is anymore in the MLS. If they don't have anyone around them, they're stuck. They're kind of stuck to their own devices, right? And you're only as good as your worst player. And I think San Diego's got some pretty bad players in their starting 11 right now, just from a MLS standpoint. If it was like 2017, I'd say they'd have a decent team, but we're in the year of our Lord 2025 now.
On
Yeah,
name recognition
they got
alone,
Andres Reyes starting at center back. That's interesting. Regular season Reyes is probably more of a liability than an asset.
Right. But postseason Reyes, we all remember how good he was. Will San Diego even make it that far?
Well, the only reason he was really that good was because New York switched to 3 at the back. So if Reyes is going to, if San Diego pick him up, putting him in a 4-back, it's going to be a long season for them, especially with Anibal Godoy in front of them. Like, those two guys are just begging for someone to burn them, honestly.
Yeah.
In a 3-back, I think it's a bit more doable. I guess it'd be Patty McNair, Hamidi Diop, and Andres Reyes, which isn't a bad. I would like to see how that goes, but if it's a back 4 of Patty and Andres Reyes, I think it's gonna be rough.
I don't think Diop's ready to make the jump personally. I think he's going to be a good player in the league. I just don't think 2025 is his year. Just to piggyback off of Mr. Bathtub, when they signed Chucky Lozano, you looked around the rest of the MLS and you saw, okay, Hector Herrera's contract's up. Carlos Vela is a unsigned player, and you're just like, okay, you have a very, very large Hispanic population in San Diego. Is this how they're going to rejuvenate their fan base? And they had the pieces there to get these older Mexican players who are still, good value for pretty cheap, and they didn't go out and do it. So I was definitely a little disappointed in that. That was just me letting my imagination run. They just haven't made any moves that have excited me outside of Chucky Lozano.
Yeah, as an expansion team, there's so much responsibility that they have, not only with like what's on the field, but growing off of it. San Diego is a sports city, and they've suffered recently with like losing the Chargers to Los Angeles, but they love their baseball there, and soccer is like obviously it's huge. It's huge in San Diego. So they not only do they have to perform on the pitch, but they have to grow off the pitch in order to show that they're here and that they're a serious team. I think to like what St. Louis did when they entered the league, and then they came fit first in the West. Then they lost in the opening round of the playoffs to Sporting Kansas City, and I don't bring it up a lot, but um, I think back to like the city of St. Louis bought into St. Louis City, and they were ready. They were excited. I'm just not feeling that with San Diego right now. Is it because they're just so close to Los Angeles, who already has two teams? Is it just I'm not feeling it with their signings? There's so much that they have to do to make them not just like a little brother team, but to show that they're here, and that they should be taken seriously.
Or the bigger elephant in the room, they killed the loyal.
That's what I was about to
True.
say. That's the big one, at least in my eyes.
Do
Yeah.
you guys think, and I'd love for the panel to answer this question, but how I kind of see things going for them is them kind of becoming the Philadelphia Union of the West through the the Right to Dream Academy. Do you guys just see them feeding their academy kids through there and then trying to displace it with DP level guys similar to that of a Gazdag?
I don't know. I'm not in tune with their academy. Is it as stacked as Phillies might be?
I think they're in a more talent-rich area than Philadelphia is, and LAFC and the Galaxy don't really do enough with the academy. San Jose, actually, they've been doing more with their academy than
I mean, they
both
have
of the
to.
LA clubs have. I think it's a huge untapped market for them, and I think they could, but once again, you got to see it happen first.
Absolutely.
Right.
With
Right. And as an expansion team, can you get your ownership I mean, can they stay bought into this right to dream idea, right? Because if you're the Union, the Union were bad for a long time, right? Let's they peaked when their players started coming through, the Mark McKenzie's, the Brandon Aaronsons, when they started coming through and making their starts in the first team. But it took a little bit. Can you keep everyone aligned while you might suffer through bad seasons? Because I really think that for the first couple of years, San Diego might be like Cincinnati were when they first entered the league. There's just I don't see the quality in the lineup yet. So if they can keep them aligned, I think like what Jeremy said, they're in such a talent rich area that they become that team that's the academy team. LA is all about bringing in the stars and not and bringing in players who can make an impact right then. San Diego, can they become the team of Southern California that simply just develops and makes them the Philadelphia, like what Daniel said? I think they could if they can stay aligned and not stray when things don't go right.
I also think there's a very, very, very nice storyline that could develop over the next decade. Not just a rivalry between them and the LA teams and San Jose being thrown in there, but Club Tijuana is right there as well. They're going to see each other in Leagues Cup. There's going to be some bad blood there because they're going to be taking academy kids from each other. I'm excited for that one as well, if that actually does, unfold.
Anything else we want to touch upon before we wrap it up? I know I had predictions on here, but we're getting close to the hour plus mark here. We're pretty much at it, but we'll save predictions for next week. Maybe give me some time to jot some more down. Any other clubs we want to go towards?
I'd say predictions for like a couple weeks down the road. There's still January still has to finish.
Yeah, well, there's two types of predictions that I was thinking. One, a more broader one for the entire year, and then we can really dig into the predicted goal scorers, comeback player, U.S. Open Cup winners, all that jazz once all the players are back. But in terms of off-season windows and dealings and transfers, is there any other team sticking out to y'all?
Yeah, actually, I selfishly want to bring up Charlotte FC because I think they've made some noise. Eric Williamson was a big ad, but I think getting Pep Biel, who was on a DP deal last year, to come back on a non-DP and then open up a potential spot to sign a Miguel Myron, or Wilfred Zaha was tossed out there. Just from a prediction standpoint, we're not going to get too much into the roster, but I'm going to predict that Charlotte FC places top 3 in the East next year. That's my one prediction.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't even rate Pep Biel that high, honestly. I'm sorry.
I don't rate him that high as a DP, but if he's coming in on max TAM, that's huge.
We'll see.
Oh, so it's the amount of money he's making that makes him better. Got it. Okay.
No, I think the MLS as a whole, it comes down to a few different things, but one of those factors is how much talent can you put on the field with the restrictions in place, right? I think there are other teams that would make Pep Biel, given his history, a DP. So when you get a guy like that who isn't one, who's committed to Dean Ball and along those lines, you already have great attacking options in Liao Abada. Karol Swiderski's a question mark. When he's in form, he's great. I don't believe he'll be with Charlotte next year, but I'm also a Patrick Aguimain believer. I think his ceiling is so high for a super draft guy, and he's not a DP. So, yeah, he is my guy. So I think Charlotte has the defense already in place to keep them in the top 5 with the offensive additions that they've made and the potential to get a Miguel Myron or Wilfred Zaha out there. If they could land one of those two, they'll be a top 3 team.
I'll agree with you there. You got to bring in that star, though. I think that's what Charlotte's missing right now.
Pepper will certainly spend for one too. He is not. He's very loose with the purse strings.
Yeah, it's like night and day with how he manages the Carolina Panthers versus how he manages Charlotte FC. I think Charlotte's front office has really grown into the league. They didn't come out firing like Austin did 2 years ago, but I think their front office has kept it consistent. We're going to play defensive ball. They went out and signed a Tim Ream, who they have playing left back half the time, but he's a good player. I just really like what they've done, the additions that they've made, and what they have to grow around in their midfield. They can make a guy like Brant Bardico look like a starting midfielder in the MLS, which is huge.
Any other teams before we close it out? I've got
no teams, but I wanted to say if Charlotte are committed to Dean Smith, then they have to come up with something better than Dean Ball, man. That is a nasty name.
What's your Sporting Kansas City prediction, Jeff?
Oh, I could talk for a while. I wasn't going to get into it, but look.
Well, that was
Sporting KC I
wanted to touch on because they take the floor, honestly.
Look. I would love to, I could conversate about this all day. I Sporting have done what I thought they would never do. Because, like I said, they signed Alan Pulido to a contract extension last year after I think he got 13 goals in the league. And genuinely, he was very good. I think he was very good. And then he fell off a cliff. Production-wise, he was not good. He was played as a 10 a little bit. There was some roster shakeup. And Peter Vermes had to do what he had to do because I think that he was forced to kind of play Pulido. I've heard it on good authority that he didn't want to sign Pulido to a contract, but it came from ownership that they wanted to extend him. So I'm honestly very surprised that Pulido has been moved on. And it just points to a changing, I think, as Sporting KC handles things. Obviously, they have a new director who's come in. It's not Gavin Wilkinson. He got aired out after a week for good reason. That was crazy. I don't know why they thought they could do that. And they brought in Mike Burns from the Revolution, a guy that brought in Carlos Hill. And I think the main thing that Mike Burns wants to do, we want a DP10. We want a DP10 in Kansas City, one that could honestly even be an upgrade on like what Gadi Kino was for us a few years ago. So Sporting so far are pretty quiet. I know they signed Mason Toy, which I think is a fine pickup. But the story of Sporting's offseason so far has been the people who they've cut. Johnny Russell, club captain. Some would say club legend. I'm not there right now, maybe, but he never won anything with us, so that makes me a little more hesitant. But club captain, very good player for us. He's gone. Remy Voltaire, who was a mainstay. He had his injury problems, but when he was fit, he would play in that midfield. He was able to walk because he wanted more money than we were willing to offer. Andre Ufantas, who's been there for a few years. So there's a lot that Sporting can do here. Again, I use the term rebuild, but there's a lot of movement that they have. We have 2 DP spots open right now with the sale of Pulido. And I think that we will opt for the 2 DP 4 under 22 slots, which I'm excited to see how that pans out. But it's also been a little quiet on the transfer fronts so far. So not really much to get excited about. The story, like I said, has been the people who have walked.
That's so I'm glad you brought up SKC, because that's the team I wanted to cover as my most disappointing so far. There's because I mean a lot of these moves were done very early in the offseason. Like they were done before the new year. Like we knew Russell was going out. We knew Polito's out. Like we knew, I mean, not Polito. Walter was out. The Polito deal kind of was. It's the biggest net positive so far, in SKC. And for me, it's like, man, I want more rumblings out of SKC. Like where is this? Where is this rebuild going? And I think the fact that it's just been so quiet from SKC. And I say that this was also the team that went and tried to get Ronaldo, and they were very quiet about it up until it got I guess revealed or leaked. But so I'll let them shove it in my face when they end up being correct, and get like a crazy 10 as maybe Josh would want. But I look at a team like Atlanta, who have also been quiet, but you just kind of know that Atlanta are gonna dip their toe in the market. And SKC, I'm like, please dip your whole fucking head to your toes down in the market, because I want to see a good SKC team. I think the league is better when SKC overall is a good team, mostly because it's that small market team that is just savvy, and it's a lot like savvy team in a smaller market that's also an original. That's a lot of like the Rapids. So that's kind of like kind of where I want to see teams like that. I guess all the flyover state teams, but I just want to see SKC come out with a good lineup for the year.
That makes two of us, and if Evander, hey man, it doesn't rain as much down here. Just saying. And we got barbecue. Just saying. Just saying. I'm curious. I'm curious where they think they're going to go with this. It's our first winter transfer window with Mike Burns, like I said, and he's got a lot of experience in the league. So yeah, it's really, this is the second window of like their 3-window plan, basically, that said we're going to build across these next 3 windows, and they only signed 1 center back in the, so kind of time to put your money where your mouth is.
Speaking of teams that are fun, the league's fun when this particular team is fun. We finally got that out of Colorado in 2024. What can we expect in 2025? That's just a 2-minute prediction, Juan.
I don't know. Chidozie Awaziem instantly becomes Rapids' best defender, in my opinion. And after that, it's been quiet. So a lot of the Bombito money is kind of covering for all the business that they did last year. Like right around this time, Colorado was like the clear winners of the offseason. You had Georgie, Stefan, who I'm not that big of a fan of, and then a returning Sam Vines. Like you had a bunch of like movement and like a lot of noise last year. This year, there's none of that noise. And if it's anything, the Rapids' follow-up year after making the playoffs, it's always a steep, sharp decline. So, I'm hoping that an in-season blockbuster trade is in the works. I'm hearing that they're stacking the war, as it's told to me, the GAM war chest. So if they're really stacking up the GAM war chest, I just wonder who, because I saw a guy like Jesus Ferreira, and I said I would love that player on the Rapids. Like instantly, he would bring an extra dynamic to the team, and I think he's a hardworking player. I think he would work under Armis, but ultimately, I have no predictions right now other than a sharp decline, a regression. I mean, the team said they're getting younger, and that doesn't spark any like they said like they were proud to be younger. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're a much younger team, which signals like, yeah, we're not gonna splash. So to be seen. I hope they splash just so I can look dumb. talking about him here.
I'm surprised they haven't splashed on a DP winger at all. I feel like that could definitely raise their ceiling a little bit.
That's what they need, man. That's what they need, that guy on the wing. They need a Buanga. They need a Bukhari, some guy that's just going to do damage out there and, provide goals more than anything. But we'll see.
And then I think a great one to end on, just a one question. Jeremy, will your Portland Timbers be a playoff team next year?
I think they will be. I think what we saw last year from them was overperformance and underperformance. Overperformance with the goal scoring, underperformance with the defense. Those underlying numbers indicated a playoff team that could certainly win a playoff game and get to another round. So I'm expecting a little bit more return to the mean, particularly not so much from the goal scoring department, but definitely from the defense. The only thing they really need to work on defensively is keeping the ball, not turning it over in bad areas, and defending set pieces, because they gave up the most set piece goals in the league last year, tied with MLS Cup champion LA Galaxy, at least in the regular season. So there is a formula there. The Timbers are kind of like a Galaxy light, except they don't have I don't think their top end talent is the ceiling of Puig, Peck, Joveljic, and Paintsil, but there is a ton of talent in that attack. And if they can just make the slight little tweak to figure out the defense, which I thought was going to be inserting Kamal Miller next to Dario Zuparic for the remainder of the season after the league's cup break, Phil Neville didn't do that. And they crashed out after starting Miguel Araujo and Zuparic in that wild card game. So a little bit more defensive consistency, a little bit making it a little easier on Maxime Crépeau, who will be a very good goalkeeper again, even if he wasn't that great last year. It's just a little bit more regression to the mean and maybe a little less stress and not having to come back from so many multi-goal deficits on the road. Even though, particularly, I was there for the one in Salt Lake. That was glorious. That was absolutely glorious. But a little bit less of that. Pick your moments. Pick your moments for it.
Jeremy, where can they find you online? Plug your socials here.
All right. You can find me on the Elon app, because that shit ain't Twitter anymore. You can find me there at Sports Guy Jeremy, usually screaming into the void about something or making fun of the Seattle Sounders, which is my secondary hobby. By the way, that Paul Arriola trade, that's gone through. What are they going to do about that, and how much salary is Dallas taking on? That's going to be interesting. On Twitter, on the Elon app at Sports Guy Jeremy, on Blue Sky at jeremypeterman.bsky.social, and on the general web, cascadiafc.substack.com for the best Portland Timbers coverage, for some pretty good Seattle Sounders coverage, and still no Vancouver coverage because we can't find a Whitecaps writer or someone to care about the Vancouver Whitecaps, which, much like their own ownership, I don't think they care about them either. So subscribe, read, and follow me on the socials, because I don't just talk about MLS. There are a lot of things that make me very angry. So particularly the New York Jets. I don't want to talk about them right now because it's Major League Soccer season, or about to be. Year 30. What did we think of that ball? Ooh, beautiful. I love when they do the blue and green with that ball.
What about you, Josh? Where can they find you?
On Twitter at Josh Bathtub, Elon's app. On Twitter, Josh Bathtub. I'll be on there. I'm on there a lot. I'm on there a lot more than I probably should be for a guy who has a full-time job. But yeah, I tweet a lot about SKC, tweet a lot of St. Louis slander. So I get it. I get slandering your rivals. That's what's fun. And I, unfortunately, Kansas City Chiefs fan. So I struggle just as much as you do, Jeremy. I get it, man. We are in the same boat, you and I.
And Daniel, where can they find you?
You can find me on X, known in this group as the Elon app, at Box Pro MLS. Major League Shill's the name. You can usually catch me on there fighting with people about pro rel or just the overall growth of the MLS. That's typically where I find the most joy is trying to actually show mathematical and substantiated proof that the league is growing year over year. It's just not growing as fast as people want, and the best thing they can do is invest in it early with their time. So when it does grow, they don't look like bandwagon fans.
Well said. You can find me at Juanners715 on X, Elon's app. And you can find me, the only place I actually have Juanners, just no numbers, just pure Juanners is on Blue Sky. So Juanners at bsky.social as well. Follow at Box State Footy on Twitter, X. And that's going to be it from us. Thank you guys for listening to this very extensive MLS podcast. And we'll see y'all when we see y'all. Bye-bye.